Hello, welcome to Tucson Festival of Books 2023. My name is Carl and I'm from the Pima County Book Library. And I'm here with students from the Sahuaro High School. And we're going to interview Claire McFall, author of Trespassers. Take it away.
How much input did you have in the covers of your books?
It depends, because I have got a few books published and I've got different books in translation, so every time it gets translated you also get to get another version of the cover, which is really awesome. And sometimes the publishers will say, how do you envisage the cover? And sometimes the publishers will say, this is our concept for the cover, what do you think about this? Or here's a couple of concepts for the covers, which one do you prefer? And sometimes the publisher says, here's the cover. And it kind of depends who you're working with, how much input they give you. I've always been super lucky in that I have never had a cover that I haven't immediately thought, I love this. And I have to say the Walker US versions of the Fireman trilogy are probably my favourite because they're just so beautiful and artistic. But I think just across the board with all of the books I've ever had, I've never gotten a book about, ooh, I'm not sure about that. So I've been a lucky author so far.
The way Ferryman ended seemed like it could have ended, but I was curious to know if you plan on writing it as a trilogy.
I didn't. I knew that the story of these two people wasn't finished, but I had no idea where to go with the story. So I have written 27 books now, and Ferryman was the first book that I ever wrote. It didn't get published until I had written another 8 books. So I wrote it, I was quite happy with it, and then I just kind of moved on because I didn't know where to take it. And it wasn't until the book was edited, published, came out, that I sort of started thinking about, well, what might be the next idea. I just didn't have a concept for where book 2 could go. I knew there could be a book 2, but I didn't know what to make the storyline. And I remember I was driving back from the beach with my husband and my kids one day, and I just kind of got this little flash of inspiration. I was like, I know what the story is. And it's something my mum always likes to say, and it's like, you know, one of these, your mum has these like little tidbits of things to try and make you behave, and her thing would be, somebody always sees you. Whenever you're thinking about doing not like chucking out litter or truanting off school or something like that, somebody always sees you. And I thought, that's totally the thing, because Tristan and Dylan in the second book move into the real world, but also the real meat of the story is that somebody sees them. And they're like, well, if they're doing it, I want to do it. And it's all, sometimes it can be okay, like if one person goes against the flow and they can get away with it, but if another person and another person and another person, then there's going to start to be more consequences. So the concept of the second book was Dylan and Tristan did the thing that was right for them, but someone else has spotted them and wants to do the same, and what's going to be the consequences of everybody wanting to do the thing that they have.
How were you able to think of the details for the settings and personalities of the characters?
So I really like setting things, if I can, in places that I know, because I know what it looks like, I know what it feels like to be in that space, and I kind of feel like it feels more realistic for the reader, even if they don't know the space, if they've got a confidence that the character knows where they are actually going and that there is a set setting in mind. So for Dylan's home place is set in Glasgow, which is where I'm from. So I knew what the buildings looked like, I knew what the train station looked like, I knew what the feel of the setting was, this kind of glum, rainy, dark, Scottish kind of urban setting. When it comes to characters, I like to do the same thing again if I can, write what you know. So a lot of Dylan is based on me when I was younger, which is why she's a bit cringe and shy and embarrassing. I guess that was me. But the Tristan character, because he's a fantasy character in a way, because he's the Greek Charon the ferryman, he gets to be part of my fantasies that I had when I was a kid. Like, this would have been like my ideal person, somebody who's like confident, they can inspire you, but also you're just like, okay, I'm lucky, I'm so blessed. And that just kind of seemed a natural fit for the 14-year-old me. So as much as I can, I take things from what I know and what I've experienced so that it feels realistic, and that way when it starts to move into the fantasy elements, you're already kind of grounded in the story and you feel like you're in a real place.
Did the characters in your series stay the same at the planning stages of the books, or did they change, and if so, how?
Ooh, that's a really hard question. I knew that Dylan was going to go on a journey, so she obviously changes because of what happens to her in the first book. It's kind of hard to do a story about the afterlife without giving the spoiler of I'm going to kill her off. But she undergoes this massive transformation, and I think what is a common theme in young adult fiction is take the character out of their comfort zone, take them away from their family bonds, put them on their own, and then it's part of growing up, right? Discovering who you are. So I know that she was going to go on an emotional journey and grow up and also learn how to make connections with other characters, because in the first book, she's not really got connections with anybody. Her and her mum are so distant from each other. She's never even met her dad. Her best friend has moved away and there's no other connections in her school. So she's not good at building social connections around her, and I wanted her to learn how to do that. So she was the one that kind of underwent the most transformation, but I also wanted Tristan to have a transformation in that kind of felt like he got a raw deal. Like, can you imagine if you were the death figure? Because loads of cultures have got a different death figure. The Chinese have got something called the black and white permanence. We've got like the death figure with the side and stuff. Pretty much we've all got one who we think is going to come and take the soul away. And I was trying to think, imagine how lonely and rubbish it would be to be that person that nobody wants to meet ever. And I kind of thought, I would like you to get to have a life in the story. So he changed in that he was started off as this kind of cold figure that had made a protective shell around himself because he doesn't get to have connections and other stuff that other people have, and let him have a life that we get to experience. So hopefully he had a positive transition, kind of from being this being who just has a purpose but not a life, to somebody who's got the kind of connections that we get to enjoy. I hope that answered the question.
What was your inspiration for writing books?
Oh, I really hate confessing this one because I think it's dead cringe. But I had a dream, and I hate saying that. I had a dream, and then it became a book. But it's the truth. It's the most awkward, embarrassing truth. I totally did. I had a dream that I was on this train, and it was jam-packed. And then you have one of these kind of like lights on and lights off moment in the dream, and then everybody was gone, and it was just me on my own. And I guess it says something about me that we won't question too deeply. But I thought, if you're the only person left, you're the one that something bad has happened to, and you're probably dead. Don't know quite why my mind went there, but it did. And I was just sort of mulling this idea over as I was driving, because I had quite a long commute between where I lived in Innerleithen and where I was working in Lesmahego, and you could not have two more Scottish sounding places, and there was no traffic, so I had quite a lot of time just to sort of think. So I was pondering it, and it just sort of grew arms and legs. So I didn't ever set out to write a retelling of a Greek myth. It just made sense. Like, she just sort of came out of the tunnel, and I'm like, okay, where could you be, who could you meet? And then I realised that's what I was doing. I was rewriting the Greek myth, but inspiration kind of comes from anywhere. I've got another book out called The Last Witness, which is based on a camping trip that I took with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and he's quite outdoorsy, and I was trying to impress him. And we went down to this beach in Ayrshire, and he loves that kind of thing, so he gets out of his really knackered old Volvo that we had drove down there, and he was like, this place is amazing, there's no one around. And I got out of the car and thought, there's no one around, we're going to die. And I just thought, this is the perfect place for like a horror book, because you literally couldn't see anybody. There was no ambient light, so at night it was pitch dark, and it was quite hilly behind the beach, so like the wind would whip over it and it was kind of like screaming, and then you've got the hiss of water all night. And I just thought, we're sleeping in a tent on the beach with no one around, and we're going to be one of these idiots where, you know, the knife goes into the tent and then they're all found like decimated the next morning. I'm like, we are going to be these stupid people. This is the place to set a horror book. So that became a kind of psychological horror book. And I think inspiration can kind of come from anywhere. You can go to a place and visit it. You can have a like mythology that you hear. Sometimes like you go to the museums and they tell you about, when I was in China, I got to go to China to talk about fireman, and they showed us these bones that they used to have, where they would carve into the bone and then burn it and look at the patterns, and they would use that to tell the future. And I was like, that's totally amazing. I want to use that in a book. So it was rolled into something. So I think it's just, as you experience life, you pick up things that are cool and you weave stories around it.
How did you go about getting your book published?
Oh, it was such a faff. It's hard. You've basically got kind of three options if you want to get a book published. You can self-publish, you can do a small independent publisher, or you can try and go to a bigger publisher. If you do self-publishing, it's the easiest, but also in my opinion the worst, because anyone can do it, but also anyone can do it. So you can put your book up really easily, but so can hundreds of thousands of other people, and you're this wee voice kind of shouting in a sea of voices. Getting access to a small independent publisher and getting access to an agent is kind of the same process, in that you write this letter which says, I'm amazing, my book's amazing, please, 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 do you want to read it? And then you send them the first wee bit of the book. And then hopefully what they do is they say, hey, I would really like to read the rest of it. So you send them the whole book. You have to write the book in advance, unfortunately, so it's quite a lot of work where you may not get paid for it and you're just writing on hope. And then hopefully, if they like it, if it's a small independent publisher, they might offer you a contract for that book, or if it's an agent, they might say, I'd like to take you on, and then they try and sell you to the bigger publishers, because a lot of bigger publishers won't let you send your book directly to them. They think if it goes through an agent, well, an agent believes in it, so it's probably worth reading. I tried really hard to get Ferryman an agent, and I got really close. I got 2 agents who asked for the full manuscript, and they both decided to pass. And out of that was out of 10, and I didn't know then, but that's actually quite a really positive sign. I just thought, nobody wants it, and I went on and wrote another book, and another book, and another book, and I kept trying this thing of shooting it to 10 agents each time. What I probably should have done was edited the book a little bit and tried again, but I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about publishing, so I just kind of kept on my merry way. And then it was my 8th book that I sent out to a publisher in London, and he said, an agent, and he said, would you like to come and we'll have lunch and we'll talk about it. And just while I was down for lunch, we talked about books that I'd written in the past, and he heard about Ferryman. He said, I'd really like to read it. And he read it and he loved it, and he's like, this is it, this is the book that we start with. And so that was the one he pitched to publishers, and we were really lucky. We got a publishing contract for it, and then it just gathers momentum from there, hopefully.
What was the most difficult part of Trespassers to write?
I think it was interweaving the stories, because Ferryman is pretty much intensely around just Dylan and Tristan. You're kind of with them all of the time, with the parents coming in at little bits. With Trespassers, I was introducing Susan and Jack, and I love both of those characters. I really like her because she's a different kind of Ferryman than Tristan. She's less hardened than he is at the start. She's a bit more personable, but she's still a bit kind of acerbic. And I really loved the soul that she was trying to ferry, because I quite like a bad boy character. They're so much fun to write. It's so much fun to get to be a bad boy for different parts. But it just meant there was loads more moving parts, and I was trying to interweave both stories and make sure that they kept moving forward, but they also had to meet at the right time. So that was a little bit trickier, because I'm not a very good plotter. I'm a pantser to my bones, because I feel this is a really bad way to write, but it works for me, that if you plan everything out, sometimes you lose the joy of the story, and then you don't want to write it, because there's nothing left to discover. So I don't like to plan things out too detailed. I like to kind of just let the story flow. But when you've got things like interweaving storylines that have to intersect at certain points, that gets really tricky. So I think that was the hardest thing for me.
May I ask the question? So, in that, as a teacher, how did you incorporate that with your students as far as writing?
I tell them, please don't do what I did. It's because I was an English language arts teacher in Scotland, and I'm a creative writing teacher in a middle school in the US. And what I teach is, it's much better to plot, it's much better to understand where your narrative is, think about your narrative arc. When you've got that narrative arc, think about actually how do you want to tell the story? Do you want to start at the start? Do you want to start in the middle and then go back to the start and work your way through? You have to think about these beforehand. It's so much easier if you have character notes, so that you've got a real grasp of your person, and then you start to write. And then I say, but I don't do that. And I think sometimes you just have to offer the structure, so that they can see that there's a way to get more comfortable with the story in their head before they start to write. But you just have to appreciate that some people don't write in that way, and I know I don't write in that way. It's really hard as a teacher who likes to be a control freak to say, yeah, just write it, it'll be fine, knowing that's what I do, but knowing that I want them to come up with the best thing for them. So sometimes it's hard to let go of the reins.
Last year we interviewed somebody who uses an Excel spreadsheet to keep track of characters and stuff like that.
Do you know what? It's so sensible, because I spent ages going through a 75,000 word manuscript looking for a mum's last name. I'm like, I know I gave you one. I know I gave you a last name. I have no idea what it is, and I can't find it. And if I had character notes, it would be right there. Mackenzie. No, I'm just like, nah. That was extremely frustrating. Or is she wearing a jumper? I don't remember if she's wearing a jumper, and you're tracing back like 8 days worth of things to see what she was changing clothes into.
What inspired you to become a teacher in college?
I started with a teacher first, because I went to university, and I went to university too young, I think. I went when I was 16, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a grown-up. I wanted a job, and I wanted an apartment, and I wanted a car. So I went to university at 16, and I came out at 20, and I thought, okay, now you have to get a job. So I got a job with a power company, and I hated that. And I had an apartment, and I had a car, and I had a job, and I thought, this is lame. Let's try again. So I thought, what would you like to do? And my mum was an English teacher, and I thought, well, maybe I would like to be an English teacher. So I had to go back to university and do a conversion course because I had lots of arts credits, but not as many language arts credits. So I converted that, and then I did my teacher training. And it was when I was doing my teacher training that I fell back in love with young adult fiction, because obviously I was having to read a lot more of it. And when I was talking to the kids and we were talking about writing and stuff, and they were like, well, do you write? And I started writing some short stories, and I tried to write a book just to see if I could. And it was kind of a thing between the kids, if they were like, bet you can't, I said, bet you can't. And I was like, bet you could. And so I had a try, and I had no idea how to do it, and I had no idea what the process was. And I was just kind of fumbling my way in the dark, but I just really enjoyed writing the stories because I had a thing when I was younger of like daydreaming all of the time, and you would just like live a story in your head. And so the books is just kind of like that. You get to just be another person and go through their journey, and because they don't plot and plan like you should, then I get to kind of live the journey with them as they go through the book. So that's kind of why I like it, I think. And it does link in really well to teaching, because when we're doing writing, you can say, well, hey, I do this, I like stories too, and they feel there's more connection there.
What is like your favorite moment?
No, it's not.
The favourite moment in the book?
Yeah, and
In Trespassers, I think I really like the moment at the end where Dylan and Tristan are like in her room, and we've like had most of the drama, and the mum and dad are on a date again, and they're like, they're kissing, and it's such a weird thing, but I kind of came to this really late of, as you're growing up, you start to realise that your parents are people.
yeah.
I never had this realisation until I became a parent, and then I was like, oh, she's not just, and I think this is supposed to happen when you're 17, 18, but did not happen for me. I was just like, no, she's mum, that's the box, stay in it, thank you very much. And then I became a parent, and I was just like, yeah, you actually are somebody in your own right with your own hopes and dreams. It's really embarrassing to confess that I'd sort of not had this epiphany until I was like way too old. But I just thought it was really cute of the fact that she's like kind of grossed out by it, like, my mum was on a date, my dad was on a date, and they're kissing, and it's weird, and I don't like it. But also understanding that her parents are people, and that they've got their own lives, and that their relationship is on its own journey. And I just thought that was really cute, and it mirrored my pathetically late understanding of the fact that my own parents were people with weaknesses as well as positives.
How long have you had writing and writing?
So I started writing when I was really young, and this is going to make me sound ancient, but it's not as bad as it sounds. I had a typewriter, so I used to bash away on the keys, and I only type with my left hand, which people think is really fit, and I'm super fast too, so my hand kind of goes like this. It's like Thing from the Addams Family. It's so fast, and this hand just comes as a shift key, bum, 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 and it looks. I actually had to film it once for a TikTok thing because my kids were like, "Oh, Miss, you've got to." It was like, it's really unnerving to watch. This one wee hand just fly right the keyboard, but it's because my left hand was stronger and it could hammer the keys better than my right hand could. So I learned to type one-handed because I was using this typewriter so much. And I kept trying to write novels, and I would get to like chapter 3 and I would totally run out of steam. And thankfully these don't exist anymore, but I was really into it, and I used to write really awful poetry as well when I was in my teens, and thankfully that also doesn't exist. And then I came away from it because I went to university and thought I had to be cool and grown up. And so I stopped reading and I stopped writing, and I was far not as cool as I thought I was. And it took a long time to come back to it, but I'm really, really glad I did. And I think it was 15 years ago now that I started writing, and I've just kept doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. And when I initially started, it's because we only had one TV in our apartment. And I started reading again, and I read through all the Twilights in like 2 days, and I read through all the Hunger Games in like 2 days, and then I just started trying to write, and it kind of captured my evenings because I get so into the story and I see the story in my head. I don't know how other people write, you know, you're just like, this is my thing that I do. I have no idea if this is how all authors do it, but I kind of see the thing happening in my head, and then there's like a wee voice. It's not even my voice, there's a wee voice that comes from back that sort of narrates it, and I just try and write down what the wee voice says. So I don't know if that's an unusual thing, if other authors actually think about the words and then write down words that are sensible. But I just sort of try and shut up, which doesn't happen often, as you can tell. And then this wee gate opens at the back, and and I just write it down.
I'm obviously not an author, but I do really enjoy writing, and I can kind of relate to what you're saying, so yeah.
I think it's more of a kind of free-form kind of way of writing. And it makes me feel a bit like an imposter because I'm like, oh, there's really intelligent authors who really have something to say. And mine's more kind of stream of consciousness almost. It's subconscious. I don't even really think about it. I'm just like, well, no, one hand like this. Just letting this kind of voice talk and trying to keep up. I don't know. I should ask other authors, so how did you actually think about your words? And they probably all say yes, and then I won't believe even more, so maybe we won't do that.
What inspired you to move to the US and more specifically Colorado?
I wish I had a better answer for this. I wish I had something really deep and meaningful, but the truth is you get 300 days of sunshine a year in Colorado, and in Scotland you get a long weekend in May. It rains all the time, it's really dark, so in Scotland in the winter it gets dark about 3 o'clock and it's not light again until about 9 o'clock, so it's quite a short window, and then if you go over the north it gets even worse. And Colorado has got more brightness, more sunshine, and I married a Coloradan, so they let me. It's kind of the answer, but it's been a really cool experience and has opened up new ideas for new different kinds of stories. So we went to, there's a place called St. Elmo's in Colorado, which is a ghost town. So it was like the gold rush, and they all came in and they mined it and they built the trains and stuff, and then the gold did it, and they just left. And all these buildings have still got stuff in them. And it was just the coolest place, and I thought, I really want to write a story here. But my agent keeps saying to me, can you not write American stories with American characters set in America? And I'm like, I can write your stories set in America. I don't know if I can write an American main character that well, because there's just little tiny cultural differences in you. And I know the mindset of a British teenager really well, and I know the cultures in the school and stuff, and I'm learning here, but I don't know if I could do it authentically, and I don't like to do it unless I feel like I can do it real and well. So I could totally do a fantasy person, because that's invented. But I would hate you to read something that's an American teenager and just think this feels off. And I kind of feel like that's what it would be if I wrote it now. So I don't know, maybe if I assimilate more, or maybe I'll just have to write Scottish girl who's dumped in America and feels like a fish out of water story. I could do that, I could definitely do that.
So what are some of those cultural differences then?
There are really little things. There's a difference in the way people communicate, in that in Scotland there's a lot more banter and joking, and there's also, I don't want to say a maturity difference, but the age that people here start to become aware of like their image and how they dress, and there's a lot more freedom here in ways of like expressing yourselves sometimes. And I guess things like religion is in the country just differently. The way that people see church, the feeling around it, the way it's described, the historical things. So Scotland's got some things with sectarianism and things, particularly where I come from in South Lanarkshire, that impact people, how people live. The sports are different, and the way people identify with sports teams are different. That sounds like a really weird thing to say, but in Scotland, whether you're a Rangers fan or a Celtic fan is quite a big deal, and it can orient your friendship groups and even like schools and things. So it's hard to put a finger on, but it's really definitely there. It's really weird because they're both English-speaking countries, so you would think I could just pick me up from here, down over here. But everything feels just like a slight step to the right. And it's really weird being an adult and doing it, because you're expected to know things like how to do your taxes. And I do know how to do my taxes in another country. You're expected to know how the healthcare system works, and I do know how the healthcare system works in another country. So you feel really stupid because you should be old enough to know how these things go, but you don't. And the things that you do know are usually wrong. I'm getting there.
So it's not too personal. You mentioned that you went to university at 16.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know like how you were able to do that.
So in Scotland, we have a totally different education system. We don't graduate with a diploma. You graduate with individual subject qualifications. So it's mostly the same through elementary school, and then we don't have junior highs or middle schools. We just have high school from 11 to 18. So when you're in S1, 2 and 3, you just follow a general curriculum, and that would be like grades 6 to 9 kind of thing. When you're in 10th grade in Scotland, which is our S4, you sit something called your National 5 qualifications, and you do those in all different subjects, and you can specialise. So if you're really into sciences and maths, you can do more subjects that are science and maths, and you can drop like French or something like that. And then depending on how you do in your National 5 qualifications, depends what hires you do. You're still at school, but you're studying fewer subjects. You might do 3, 4 or 5 subjects. And then what grades you get in your hires dictates what universities you can go to. So say you wanted to do politics at St Andrews, and St Andrews University says you've got to get 3 A's and a B in your hires. So if you sat 5 hires in 5th year, which is 11th grade, and you get your qualifications, you can just go. You don't have to stay into 6th year because you've already got the hires that you need. If you, say, got 4 B's, you didn't get that A, and you think, well, okay, I can reset subject next year, or I can take a different subject and try and get that A, and then they'll let me in. So I needed an A and 3 B's, and I got 2 A's and 3 B's in 5th year, which was 11th grade, so off I went. We also start at 4.5 instead of 5.5, so we're already a year younger than you were. If I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't, because I was smart enough to go at 16, but everybody else was 17 and 18, and I felt out of place socially, and that was a lot harder. So I was ready to jump the gun, but I didn't know that I wasn't really ready. And I think you can tell that's all hindsight. That's a good question.
How long did it take you to write the first book?
The first book took a while because it came in stages. So I usually say, if I'm trying in book writing mode, I try and say 1,000 words a day, because that will get you a book in 3 months, because it just adds up and adds up and adds up. Usually what happens is if you can write 1,000 words, you can write 2,000 words or 3,000 words if you've got the time, because it starts to flow. And so you can find that you can do it in much more quick chunks. So I can write a book in 6 weeks if I had to. I think it took me 3 or 4 months to write Fireman, because I was just trying to fumble my way and I didn't really know what I was doing. But it was only 47,000 words. And I was like, well, that's not a book, that's a problem. So I gave it a little while, and then I added 2 chapters at the beginning. So what's the beginning of chapter 3 in Fireman originally was the beginning of the book, where it said silence, that there should be screams, cries, something, but there was only silence. That originally was, I was like, oh, that's a cool opening. But then I realised that I'd missed a whole kind of chunk of showing her life before she gets on the train, so I went back and I added that bit, and it originally ended where she crosses the line and turns over and can't see him. You know, that massive open trail. I was like, yes, anticlimactic, they'll hate it, it's perfect, done. And it was partly, I thought, oh, that's quite cool, it's like against what they're expecting, but also because I didn't know what happened next. I didn't know where she went, I didn't know what that role was going to be like, and I thought, I'll just stop there. And then my agent said to me, no, we're not doing that, this is a crap ending and you need to fix it. And this was at 5 o'clock on Friday night, and he was showing it to a publisher on Monday morning who actually became my UK publisher, and he said, you have to write me a proper ending, I'm going to show it to her on Monday, get me in. And he thought it would be like 1 more chapter. It became like a 3rd act, so I wrote 30,000 words in a weekend, and it was horrendous. And it became the whole bit of where she goes into the afterlife, and you get to see the record rooms, and you get to see home, with the fact that you can open all the doors, and she goes and she meets Eliza, and then decides that she wants to have this whole second journey, which if you haven't read the book, I'm not going to spoil. But that all kind of came about in this getting over the line of, I just was scared to show religious ideas, because I'm not a religious person, and you're talking about the afterlife, so it's kind of really hard to get around that sort of thing. So me having to avoid checking out, I was like, well, you're going to have to come up with something. What could it be? What would it be for you if you don't believe in religion? What would you hope for? So that's kind of what I went. It's just like, if I could pick an afterlife, this would be what I would pick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies. And those were really awesome questions.